Feeling stuck or unfulfilled? Searching for more meaning in your work and life? Wondering what's next? You're not alone, and you're in the right place. This is Focus on Why, the podcast that turns reflection into action. I'm Amy Rowlinson, and each week I dive deep with guests who've chosen to live and work with purpose. Together we explore what drives them, shapes their decisions, and gives their life meaning. Through real stories and honest conversations, you'll discover how to gain clarity, make confident choices, and create a life that truly matters. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Do you understand the power of a focus on why in business? Are your people truly engaged and finding meaning in their work? I deliver practical, interactive workshops that boost engagement, fulfillment, well-being, and purpose, all key drivers of higher productivity and performance. If you're ready to close your purpose gaps, reach out via the link in the show notes today. Hello, and thank you for choosing to tune into episode 526 of the Focus on Why podcast. This is my 85th solo Reflections with Actions episode. If you're a new listener to the show, firstly, welcome. But you may well be asking, what does Reflections with Actions mean? It's a valid question, and here's my answer. I believe purpose is a direction you consciously choose for your life, a compass point guiding your decisions, your energy, and how you show up in the world. But the fuel for that journey, the emotion that powers you through resistance and uncertainty, is your why. It's the deep undercurrent of meaning you assign to that purpose. When you connect the two, when you allow reflection to bring your why to the surface, and you let that self-awareness shape the actions you take, real transformation happens. Treat these Reflection with Action episodes as an opportunity to listen alongside me as I share some of the insights I've taken from the last 5 guests I've interviewed on the show and explore how they might relate to your own life and work. Podcasts don't have to be passive. As you listen, consider, what is it that Amy is sharing that really matters to me? And what will I do as a result of tuning in? To kick off today's episode, before I dive into that first guest, I want to share with you a personal story. 10 years ago this summer, I handed in my resignation. I didn't have another job to go to. I didn't have everything figured out. I just knew that the life my husband and I were living wasn't the life we wanted to keep living. At the time, my husband was in a job that was slowly destroying him. The stress was relentless, and I could see the toll it was taking on his health and well-being. Something had to change, but change needed options, and options needed a different way of earning a living. So I took a leap. My last day in the office was 8th of September 2016. By the 30th of September 2016, I had put together a 3-year plan which would enable John to step away from his city job. I started a business with a vision that reached far beyond me. I wanted to create a lifestyle that gave us choice, freedom, and the ability to live with intention rather than obligation. It wasn't an easy path. There have been setbacks, pivots, uncertainty, and moments when I questioned everything. Building a business is rarely a straight line. However, 10 years later, I can honestly say that resignation letter changed far more than my career. It changed our future. It gave us the opportunity to make decisions based on what mattered most rather than what simply paid the bills. It taught me that purpose isn't just about the work you do. It's about the life your work makes possible. I couldn't have predicted where that decision would lead. First, a property business, then a coaching business, a book, a podcast, speaking opportunities, and most importantly, the privilege of coaching remarkable people from around the world as they reconnect with their purpose and create meaningful change. Through those coaching conversations and hundreds of podcast interviews, I've been reminded time and time again that meaningful success isn't about climbing someone else's ladder. It's about building a life that reflects what matters most to you. Looking back, the resignation itself wasn't the defining moment. The defining moment was choosing to trust that a different future was possible. That is the power of perspective. What once felt risky now feels necessary. What once felt impossible now feels inevitable. What once looked like giving something up became the beginning of everything that followed. The biggest transformation wasn't what I built. It was how I learned to see success. Success isn't just about achievement, income, or recognition. It's about whether the life you're creating reflects your values, your purpose, and the things that matter most. Sometimes the biggest changes don't begin with a dramatic action. They begin with seeing something differently. A new perspective can reveal possibilities that were always there but hidden by the way we were looking at the situation. What are you seeing differently today than you did a year ago? What belief about your career, your success, or your future might be ready to be challenged? Sometimes the first step towards change isn't doing something different, it's seeing something differently. You can be successful and still feel uncertain. You can have built the career, earn the income, achieve the recognition, become the person everyone relies on, and still quietly wonder, is this really what I want next? I know this feeling well. For years, both John and I measured success by what we were achieving, the goals reached, the milestones hit, the things either of us could point to and say, I did that. But eventually, a different question started to matter more. Does the life I'm creating actually reflect what matters most to me? Because success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what your achievements make possible. The freedom, the relationships, the contribution, the experiences, the person you become along the way. This is why I created the Meaningful Success Mastermind. For ambitious people who aren't looking for more information or another goal to chase, they're looking for clarity, a clearer understanding of what success means now, a stronger connection to what matters most, a plan for creating a future that feels intentional. The September group is forming now. If you've achieved a lot but feel ready for a different kind of success, send me a message. Let's explore what's possible. If you know you're capable of more, but you want that more to mean something, this is for you. Now let's see how that same principle, reflection leading to intentional action, showed up in the lives of the last 5 guests on the podcast. Our first focus today is episode 521, Midlife Awakening, with Natalie Cordell. What happens when you search for purpose, only to discover the answers were inside you all along? Coach and newly published author Nathalie Cordell shares her journey from corporate burnout to awakening her feminine wisdom and power, from struggling with imposter syndrome and spirituality to writing her transformative book and embracing vulnerability. Nathalie's story is one of self-discovery, healing, and service. Listening to Natalie, I was struck by how beautifully she demonstrates the relationship between reflection and action. Her decision to leave a successful corporate career and write Awakening the Sleeping Queen might look like the defining moment, but the real transformation began much earlier. She describes her awakening as a gradual process of peeling back layers, sitting with discomfort, and asking difficult questions about what truly mattered. Despite having what many would consider a successful life, there remained a quiet sense that something was missing. Rather than ignoring it, she chose to become curious. One insight particularly stayed with me. Through coaching, Natalie's perspective shifted from asking, what do I want from life, to what does life want from me? That subtle change transformed the way she viewed purpose. It also challenged her belief that she had to solve everything alone, opening her to support, connection, and a deeper sense of meaning. Reflection gave her clarity. Action gave that clarity purpose. Rather than keeping her discoveries to herself, Natalie chose to share them through her writing, becoming what she describes as an ambassador for the message she'd uncovered. She didn't wait until every doubt disappeared. She simply kept following the gentle nudges that told her this was the work she was here to do. Another aspect of our conversation that resonated deeply was her willingness to question inherited beliefs, particularly around spirituality. Instead of accepting or rejecting them outright, she allowed herself to explore them with openness and curiosity, discovering what felt authentic rather than simply familiar. As you reflect on this episode, consider these questions. Is there an area of your life where quiet dissatisfaction is inviting your attention? What old beliefs or expectations might be ready to be questioned? And what one small action could move you towards the life that's asking to be lived through you? Purpose rarely arrives as one dramatic revelation. More often, it grows through a series of small, courageous decisions. Reflection uncovers what matters. Action brings it to life. Next is episode 522, Making Meaningful Connections with Eleanor Sands. At 30, Eleanor walked away from an unfulfilling corporate career to build a life aligned with her values. She shares why your past doesn't define your future, how courage can break the cycle of unhappiness, and why meaningful connections have become the foundation of both her business and her purpose. Eleanor's story is a wonderful reminder that transformation begins long before you make a life-changing decision. For more than a year, she knew something wasn't right. She confided in family and friends, wrestled with uncertainty, and continued searching for a way forward. The turning point came during a walk with her dog, when, speaking with her mum, she finally admitted she couldn't carry on. That emotional moment wasn't weakness. It was reflection finding its voice. Rather than pushing those feelings aside, Eleanor listened to them. She recognized that acknowledging what wasn't working was a first step towards creating something better. Reflection became action when she resigned. Like so many of us who have made significant life changes, she didn't know exactly what would come next. What she did know was that staying where she was no longer aligned with who she wanted to become. What I particularly loved was how Eleanor discovered her purpose wasn't something entirely new. It had been woven throughout her life all along. From her teenage years, she loved bringing people together, creating welcoming spaces, and helping others connect. What had once seemed like simply part of her personality eventually became the foundation of Wigmore Wednesdays and the business she leads today. She also speaks openly about childhood trauma, not to define herself by it, but to demonstrate that our past can become a source of strength rather than limitation. Instead of allowing adversity to determine her future, she chose to create meaning from it. This perfectly illustrates the reflection with action approach. You reflect not to dwell on the past, but to understand it, learn from it, and consciously choose what comes next. As you reflect on Eleanor's story, ask yourself, is there something in your life you've known isn't working, but haven't yet acknowledged? What strengths have been quietly present throughout your life that you may be overlooking? And how could one courageous action create space for a more fulfilling future? Eleanor reminds us that self-belief grows through action. You don't need to see the whole path before taking the first step. Reflection provides the clarity. Action creates the momentum. Together, they become the foundation for a life that's genuinely aligned with your why. For my next reflection with action focus, we will need to head to the United States of America to hear Marc McNeice share his why in episode 523, Changing Lives from the Inside Out. Did you know that brain injuries are often undiagnosed in high-risk populations? Marc is on a mission to change that. Sharing his expertise as both a brain injury specialist and survivor, Marc offers a groundbreaking perspective on how hidden brain injuries impact addiction, mental health, and recovery. He referenced eye-opening statistics, the importance of proper screening, and why awareness alone isn't enough. Action matters too. Bringing empathy and education to the forefront, Marc shared stories of survival, advocacy, and hope, revealing how he's changing lives through brain injury awareness. Listening to his story, I was struck by how profoundly awareness transformed his life. For years, the symptoms resulting from multiple brain injuries were mistaken for anxiety and other mental health conditions. Without an accurate explanation, confusion gave way to shame, self-doubt, and coping mechanisms that only deepened the struggle. Everything changed when one counsellor took the time to look at his whole story rather than treating isolated symptoms. Receiving the correct diagnosis didn't simply give Marc information, it gave him understanding. The guilt and confusion that had defined so much of his life were replaced by self-compassion and a path towards healing. But Marc is clear that awareness is only the beginning. Rather than stopping at personal understanding, he chose to turn his experience into purpose. Today, he advocates for routine brain injury screening in high-risk populations, helping others avoid years of unnecessary suffering and ensuring more people receive the support they truly need. This is where reflection becomes action, using insight as a catalyst for meaningful change. As Marc says, once the people do hear, once you do have a diagnosis, a lot of the guilt, the shame, the confusion start to look differently. you start to see a tangible reason for a lot of the experiences you've been having in life. His story invites us to consider our own lives. What recurring challenge or pattern might you still be judging rather than seeking to understand? What could change if you replace self-criticism with curiosity? Mark's why grew beyond his own recovery. His determination became ensuring others wouldn't have to guess against the wrong things or to spend decades searching for answers. His mission is simple but profound. The main goal is to really start screening for brain injury, bring the awareness, bring the education. You can eliminate the ignorance of what's happening after brain injury. As you reflect on the episode, ask yourself, when have you taken time to understand your challenges rather than simply reacting to them? Where could greater self-awareness lead to compassionate action for yourself or someone else? What experience or insight from your own life could become a force for good in the lives of others? The lesson from Mark's story is simple. Awareness is only the beginning. When reflection leads to meaningful action, your own healing has the power to become hope for someone else. Next is episode 524, Lifting for Life with Natalie Hurdley. Who are you when life changes the roles that once defined you? Team GB powerlifter, personal trainer and mum, Natalie Hurdley shares how she's navigated life's many transitions while discovering strength that goes far beyond the barbell. She reflects on how motherhood, running a business and competing at the highest level have reshaped her identity, and why empowering women to overcome their fear of the gym has become her mission. Discover why building muscles is vital for long-term health, confidence, and independence, and what it truly means to keep lifting for life. Identity is something most of us rarely question until life forces us to. You wear the labels you've collected over the years, professional, athlete, parent, friend, until one day they no longer fit quite as they once did. Natalie knows exactly what that feels like. For more than 15 years, she identified as a business owner, personal trainer, and elite athlete. Then she became a mother, and everything shifted. The routine she relied upon no longer worked. The confidence she once took for granted was replaced by uncertainty, and she found herself asking questions she'd never needed to ask before. Rather than clinging to who she'd been, Natalie chose to discover who she was becoming. Through what she describes as deep identity work, she recognized that motherhood hadn't replaced the athlete or entrepreneur. It had expanded her identity. By reflecting honestly, adapting her routines, and surrounding herself with a supportive community, she built a version of herself that felt authentic for this new season of life. Her story is a wonderful example of reflection with action. Reflection wasn't simply about understanding what had changed. It became the catalyst for making intentional decisions that aligned with her new priorities. That same approach shaped her business. Instead of holding on to old ways of working, Natalie recognized the changing digital landscape and intentionally invested her energy into YouTube, creating content that could continue serving women long after it was published. Rather than chasing short-term visibility, she chose long-term impact. Natalie's mission is to get a barbell into the hands of as many women as possible. Not because lifting weights is simply about fitness, but because strength changes how women see themselves. Listening to Natalie reminded me that identity isn't fixed. It's something you continually shape through the choices you make, especially during life's transitions. As you reflect on this episode, consider these questions. Which roles or labels have shaped your identity? Has your current season of life outgrown any of these definitions? What daily habits or assumptions no longer serve the person you're becoming? And what one action could better align your life with this next chapter? Reflection gives us clarity, but action is what creates transformation. Natalie shows that our strongest, most authentic selves aren't discovered all at once. They're built gradually, through the courage to question who you've been and intentionally step towards who you're becoming. My final reflection with action focus today is episode 525, Establish Better Boundaries with Larissa Astara Gray. Have you ever questioned where your boundaries came from and how they shape the way you see yourself and your relationships? Survivor, sex education speaker, and founder of Better Boundaries CIC, Larissa Astara Gray shares her journey from childhood trauma and teenage rape to reclaiming her voice and purpose. She explains why breaking the silence around sex, consent, and healthy relationships is essential, how education empowers the next generation, and why safe relationships begin with understanding your own boundaries. Listening to Larissa reminded me that boundaries aren't simply about saying no. They're about knowing yourself well enough to recognize what feels safe, healthy, and aligned with your values, and having the confidence to communicate that to others. For Larissa, this understanding wasn't learned overnight. Growing up in an environment where many of her choices were controlled, she gradually lost touch with her own voice. Through years of reflection and healing, she began reclaiming the parts of herself that had been shaped by trauma, expectation, and silence. One powerful example was her decision to change her name. It wasn't simply symbolic. It represented a conscious decision to step away from an identity rooted in pain and embrace one that reflected the person she was choosing to become. Reflection revealed what no longer served her. Action allowed her to reclaim her agency. That same process became the foundation of her life's work. Rather than allowing her experiences to define her, Larissa channeled them into purpose by founding Better Boundaries CIC, helping young people develop healthy boundaries around relationships, sexuality, and consent. Her mission isn't driven by fear, but by hope, creating a future where young people have the language, confidence, and understanding to build respectful, safe relationships. What also stood out was her commitment to changing conversations that have too often remained hidden behind shame or taboo. By speaking openly about consent, relationships, and boundaries, she's creating spaces where understanding replaces silence and education replaces fear. This is what happens when insight turns into action. Reflection allows you to understand your story. Action enables you to rewrite it. As you reflect on this episode, consider these questions. Where in your life have you been living according to someone else's expectations rather than your own values? Is there a boundary that needs to be expressed more clearly? How might your own experiences become a source of strength or service for others? Boundaries aren't walls that keep people out. They're the foundations of healthy relationships, self-respect, and authentic connection. When you understand why they matter and have the courage to honor them, you don't simply protect yourself. You create the conditions for deeper trust, greater confidence, and a more purposeful life. Each of these conversations today explores a different aspect of purposeful living, yet together they tell one story. 5 guests with 5 reminders that purpose is something you uncover, shape, and live. Here are my key takeaways. From Natalie Cordell, purpose grows through courageous curiosity. From Eleanor Sands, one brave decision can change the direction of your own life. Marc McNeice, awareness is only the beginning. Action changes lives. Natalie Hurdley, your identity evolves every time you choose to grow. Larissa Astara Gray, healthy boundaries don't separate us from others. They help us show up as our truest selves. 5 conversations, 5 different lives, 5 different journeys, yet every one of them followed the same pattern. They paused, they reflected, they saw something differently, then they acted. That's why I believe reflection without action changes very little, but action without reflection often leads us in the wrong direction. It's when you intentionally combine the two that purpose becomes something you don't just understand, you live it. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep acting, and above all, keep focusing on why. That's a wrap for today, but the journey doesn't end here. Share your takeaways, leave a review, or post your insights. Your voice helps others discover the value of these stories. Want to dive deeper into purpose? Check the show notes for ways to work with me. Get a copy of my book or to sign up for Friday Focus, my weekly newsletter packed with clarity and inspiration. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.